Welcome to Daily Variety, your daily dose of news and analysis for entertainment industry insiders. It's Monday, March 16th, 2026. I'm your host, Cynthia Littleton. I am co-editor-in-chief of Variety alongside Ramin Satuda. I'm in LA, he's in New York, and Variety has reporters around the world covering the business of entertainment. In today's episode, in our box office segment, we'll hear from Variety's Rebecca Rubin on a breakdown of the weekend. The Colleen Hoover cinematic universe is real, and Rebecca has the receipts. But before we get to all of that, here are a few headlines just in this morning that you need to know. The Oscars are over. Long live the Oscars. It was a big night for one battle after another, and a big night for Sinners. For this Oscar viewer, the moment of the night was Sinners cinematographer Autumn Dawn Arkapaw breaking the gender barrier for women in cinematography. After 98 years, it's about time. Congrats to Arkapaw. FCC Chairman Brendan Carr went on another verbal tear this weekend, threatening broadcast network TV station licenses for news coverage that President Trump and other conservatives don't like. Carr doesn't have the power to yank stations off the air tomorrow, but this is still a troubling level of partisanship for a regulator who is ostensibly leading an independent agency. My colleague Todd Spangler has just posted a good analysis piece on this subject on Variety.com. SAG-AFTRA has ended its first round of talks with Hollywood's major studios and streamers without reaching a contract agreement. As of today, March 16th, the Writers Guild of America comes to the bargaining table. The writers are up against a May 1st contract deadline. SAG-AFTRA and the Directors Guild of America have a June 30th contract expiration date. SAG-AFTRA will go back at it in talks after the Alliance of Motion Picture and Television Producers conducts a round of talks with the WGA, and then the DGA is lined up to come in on May 11th. Hulu's planned Buffy the Vampire Slayer reboot has collapsed. Chloe Zhao had been developing a reimagining of the beloved franchise, but per original star Sarah Michelle Gellar, the project has simply fallen apart. This isn't the first Buffy reboot that didn't happen. It probably won't be the last. All of these stories and so much more can be found on Variety.com right now. And now it's time for conversations with Variety journalists about news and trends in show business. If it's Monday, we're talking box office with Rebecca Rubin, Variety's resident expert who is senior film and media reporter. She works hard every Sunday to bring us the box office numbers, and not even the Oscars gets in the way of this Chronicle of the Turnstiles. Rebecca Rubin, thank you as ever for joining me to talk about the box office.
Thank you for having me.
Well, it was a busy weekend. It wasn't the most blockbuster weekend of numbers, but it was an interesting weekend in new titles and genres. It was a big weekend for Colleen Hoover fans. Her latest romantic drama, Reminders of Him, opened very successfully, topped the box office. Rebecca, once again, you had your finger on the pulse. You wrote a great piece for Variety's print edition, in print and online, looking at how Colleen Hoover had become a real secret weapon, now not so secret weapon at the box office. What gave Reminders of Him the oomph to make it open at number one this week?
This movie really does solidify Colleen Hoover as an in-demand talent for Hollywood. This, as you mentioned, is her third film that has opened at the box office to successful results. And part of what's working here is really just that her work is filling a void that has mostly gone to streaming. And it's these female skewing romance drama titles that have, for the most part, become very prominent on Netflix and Amazon Prime. And so when they are in theaters, even if they don't have the best reviews in the world, people are going out to see them. And it just speaks to this female audience that I think is underserved here. 80% of the opening weekend crowds were women. And so it just shows that they really do feel like when something is for them, they'll come out to see it.
Look at what you see on the top 10 of Netflix's original movies most weeks. Not every week, but most week. It's a lot of romantic dramas and a lot of romantic comedies. And this really does feel like green shoots for people being able to open a movie. I gotta believe this is modestly budgeted.
Yeah, it was $25 million. And so it opened this weekend globally to $28 million. And it definitely sets it on a great track for Universal, which backed the film. this kind of movie, this mid-budget movie that was designed to kind of be an easy win for studios, has also kind of fallen by the wayside. And so we might see more of these moving forward. The marquee talent here is Colleen Hoover, and she's showing that people were obsessed with her on Book Talk. That's where she really blew up. And then those fans want to see how their favorite novels are translated to the big screen. And so she's really the one driving people to theaters.
And I'm guessing she has a pretty sweet deal in movies, because I know she's very aware of the value of Colleen Hoover over the title.
This is actually something I wrote about in my marquee story, but her asking price definitely has risen considerably. But one thing that's interesting to note is for the first 3 films that she's had adapted, and that's It Ends With Us, Regretting You, and Verity, which actually comes out in October, those movies she sold the rights to. And she said that early in her career, she kind of just felt like, ooh, somebody's interested in adapting my work. Great, have fun with it, do your thing. And then she realized what she was giving away. And so she ended up starting her own production company where she's the one developing the films. And so she's no longer selling or licensing the rights anymore. She's trying to take the initiative in adapting the films and then going to the market. And that's what she did with Reminders of Him. Her and her producing partner, whose name is Lauren Levine, they wrote this screenplay together. They took it to the market, and then Universal bought the screenplay. She's very savvy in the space because she was a self-published author for a while. And so it's very interesting to see how her business sense is developing.
Another great story here is this is a big moment for director Vanessa Caswell, somebody who's absolutely worked, has very respectable credits, but obviously this is going to be a big moment, opening at number 1. So interesting to see in this moment of incredible consolidation to see entrepreneurial efforts making a big impact. So really interesting. Will, of course, be interesting to see if this movie has legs. And speaking of legs, 4-legged and otherwise, Hoppers seems to be that family film that is going to hang in there. It had a pretty good hold from week to week.
Yes, Hoppers was the number 1 film for the second weekend in a row. It earned about $28 million, and that is down just 36% from its debut. And so that's a pretty good hold for a family film. And as you said, it's looking to have legs, to use a funny, a little pun, but it's really important for Pixar at a time when they've had really, really big success with sequels. Inside Out 2 in 2024 was one of the biggest movies of the year, but they haven't really had a ton of success in the original space since 2017's Coco. And so this looks like it's shaping up to be the first original win in quite a while for them.
Priming the pump, that's super important for Disney. This is a nice little incoming gift to incoming CEO Josh Tomorrow. The baton will formally be passed on Wednesday. That's definitely a nice way to start, with the potential for a super strong animation franchise to be born just as you take over. Not bad. Another movie that stood out to me in your box office report was another from A24, movie Undertone. What do you think made that stand out to horror fans?
I'm not really sure what made it stand out, but it opened to just above 9 million, and that's a pretty killer start for a movie like this. It was micro budgeted, under $1 million to make. A24 acquired the film for 3 to 4 million. The fact that the box office is really at its best when all kinds of genres are being served. And so we just had a big horror movie in Scream 7. That's a little bit more of a slasher film. And then this one has a more paranormal undertone. And so I think you're able to have, especially with the horror genre, people love watching scary movies in a communal setting. And so I think it's really just the fact that they're striking during what was a pretty quiet weekend and getting the people who probably have already seen Scream twice.
Your story ends this week with a pretty positive prediction from Paul Garabedian, who has been doing this a long time and oversees box office forecasting for ComScore. He is really predicting big things for Project Hail Mary, the latest from Ryan Gosling, which opens next weekend. Rebecca, what is your forecast for this movie?
Yes, Paul is not alone in suggesting that it's going to be a very significant debut for Project Hail Mary. I have heard estimates so far of 50 million to 60 million. but word of mouth is very positive, and so there are independent tracking services who believe that the initial number could be even above 60 million, maybe getting in the 70 million range, which would be fantastic for Amazon MGM because they've just had a bit of a rough go at theatrical, and it's this situation where nobody wants them to give up on their theatrical ambitions. It's really encouraging for the industry that there is a studio who is putting out 13 new movies a year like Amazon is this year. But at the same time, they've been very expensive movies that haven't necessarily justified how much the studio has paid for them. And so this movie, Project Hail Mary, is shaping up to be the first commercial win for Amazon. And internally at the studio, they're just hoping it turns the conversation around a bit about their theatrical ambitions and what kind of things they're putting out. And so it really does seem like the kind of movie that has great reviews and is an all-audience film, and we don't get that many of those.
I'm going to name drop here, Rebecca. I saw Sue Kroll, who heads all of marketing for Amazon MGM Studios, and Courtney Valenti, who is the engine of their film division. I would definitely bet on those two knowing how to open this movie. And then, of course, Ryan Gosling. And as he proved last week on SNL, he can turn on the charm like few others. So here's really hoping for a strong box office debut. And with that, Rebecca, I will wish you a happy Oscars because we are talking here on Sunday before all the prizes are handed out. We will both be eagerly watching and helping Team Variety cover this. And I just want to thank you for all of your hard work. And the box office never stops, even on Oscar Sunday.
Thank you for having me.
As we close out today's episode, here's a few things we're watching for. Hong Kong Film Mart begins tomorrow. Variety will produce 3 print dailies out of the Asian Content Conference and Marketplace starting March 17th, and will also produce 3 digital dailies. You can find all of this content on Variety.com and our social platforms. We'll hear from our great correspondent Naman Ramachandran later this week with an on-the-ground report from Hong Kong Film Mart. Broadway Cares Equity Fights AIDS Red Bucket campaign is coming back to Broadway theaters. This is the annual 6-week spring fundraising campaign where actors bring out red buckets at the end of performances to raise money for 2 great charitable organizations. The most recent campaign last fall raised $7.5 million. The Spring Fling runs through April 26. And finally, a salute to sweet Judy Blue Eyes. Judy Collins, she of that angelic voice, has announced plans for her final tour. It will kick off on July 4th in Colonial Williamsburg, Virginia, as part of an America at 250 celebration. So far, the Collins tour is scheduled to run through November, with more dates to come. We love to hear from listeners, so please send thoughts, gripes, and other feedback about Daily Variety to podcasts@variety.com. Before we go, congrats to Paul Reeder. He's been promoted to Senior Executive Vice President and Chief Communications Officer for the Walt Disney Company as of Thursday. He'll be the chief mouthpiece for the Mouse and its new CEO, Josh Tomorrow. Reeder started his career at Disney in the publicity office of ABC in 2001. He worked for Disney's corporate communications department from 2002 to 2010, and then he became head of PR for Walt Disney Studios. Thanks for listening. This episode was written and reported by me, Cynthia Littleton, with contributions from Rebecca Rubin. Sticks, Nicks, Hick Picks. Please leave us a review at the podcast platform of your choice, and please tune in tomorrow for another episode of Daily Variety.